Have you ever driven somewhere and suddenly realized you don't remember the trip? You stopped at the lights, you made the turns, you arrived safely, but somehow you weren't really there. Your body was driving, your mind was somewhere else. Most of us have experienced that behind the wheel. Far fewer realize we're capable of living entire seasons of our lives the same way. We wake up, reach for the phone before our feet touch the floor, follow familiar routines, react to familiar problems, end another day wondering why life feels busy but strangely unchanged. Not because we're lazy, not because we lack ambition, but because the human mind is designed to automate whatever it repeats. That ability is one of the greatest gifts we've been given. Without it, every morning would feel like learning to walk again. We'd have to consciously think through brushing our teeth, making breakfast, and driving to work. Automation allows us to reserve our attention for what matters most. But every strength carries a shadow. The same ability that frees our minds can also quietly imprison them. When we stop paying attention, our routines begin making decisions for us. Our habits start determining our days. Yesterday quietly begins writing tomorrow. There's a scene in The Matrix where people believe they're making choices. They're completely unaware that an unseen system is shaping nearly everything they experience. Whether you've seen the movie or not, the metaphor is powerful. Many of us live inside of a kind of a matrix too. The difference is that ours isn't built by machines. It's built by repeated thoughts, familiar routines, and unconscious decisions we've practiced for so long they no longer feel like choices. The systems we've created begin running us. That is what I mean by autopilot. Autopilot isn't simply having routines. Healthy routines are essential. Autopilot is repeating your life without examining it. It's accepting familiar because it's familiar. It's allowing habit to replace intention. Over the last 3 lessons, we've been preparing for this moment. First, we learned to become aware. Then we learned to recognize patterns. After that, we discovered the systems producing those patterns. Today, we reached the turning point. Because awareness without action changes nothing. Patterns without choice remain patterns. Systems continue operating until someone interrupts them. That someone is you. And interruption begins with one simple question. Is this what I truly want? Or is this simply what I've always done? That question may last only a few seconds, but those few seconds can change the direction of an entire life because every intentional life begins the moment you stop living on autopilot. Here's one of the biggest misconceptions about personal growth. People think their lives are changed by big decisions: a new career, a new relationship, a new city, a new year, and a new set of resolutions. Those moments certainly matter, but they aren't where most of life is lived. Life is built in the ordinary moments between the milestones. It's built by what you do before anyone's watching. The first thing you reach for in the morning, how you respond when someone disagrees with you, whether you keep the promise you made to yourself yesterday, whether you choose another hour of distraction or another hour of growth. Those decisions rarely feel significant, yet together they quietly determine the direction of your life. Imagine walking across an open field. The first time you can choose any route you like. Walk the same path every day, however, and something begins to change. The grass bends, the ground hardens, eventually a trail appears. Months later, you no longer choose the path. The path chooses you. Our minds work much the same way. Every repeated decision wears a trail into our thinking. Every familiar reaction becomes easier to repeat. Every unexamined habit slowly transforms from something we do into something we believe we are. That's why people eventually say things like, I've never been disciplined. I'm just not an organized person. That's simply who I am. But is it? Or have you simply walked the same mental trail so many times that you've forgotten another path exists? That's the danger of autopilot. It doesn't usually ruin their life all at once. It simply removes one conscious decision after another until the familiar begins masquerading as the inevitable. Left unexamined, yesterday becomes the blueprint for tomorrow. This is why awareness by itself isn't enough. We can recognize the pattern. You can understand the system behind it. You can even know exactly why you keep making the same mistakes. Knowledge alone doesn't interrupt momentum. Choice does. Every meaningful change begins with a pause, a brief space between impulse and action, between habit and intention, between who you've been and who you are becoming. Viktor Frankl once wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose. Now, whether you've read Frankl or not, you've experienced that space. The question is whether you notice it before autopilot closes it. Because the quality of your future won't be determined by the biggest decision you ever make. It will be determined by thousands of small decisions you stop allowing habit to make for you. That's why this lesson isn't asking you to reinvent your life. It's asking you to reclaim your participation in it. One pause, one decision, one ordinary moment at a time. Because extraordinary lives are rarely built through extraordinary moments. They're built through ordinary choices made intentionally. There's a reason this lesson comes after awareness, patterns, and systems. Choice without awareness is impulse. Choice without understanding is usually temporary, but choice built on awareness becomes freedom. That's an important distinction. Many people believe freedom means having unlimited options, the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. I don't think that's true. Real freedom isn't found in unlimited choices. It's found in the ability to choose intentionally instead of automatically. Imagine a train traveling across the country. For miles, it appears locked into its destination. Then it reaches a switch. The rails move only a few inches. Passengers barely notice. But hundreds of miles later, the train arrives in an entirely different city. Life changes the same way, not through constant dramatic reinvention, through small changes in direction. That's why intentional living isn't about making one heroic decision. It's about making thousands of conscious ones. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you question the assumption, every time you protect your attention instead of surrendering it, you move the switch. Perhaps only a few inches, but direction determines destination. This is one of the reasons I find The Matrix so compelling. At its core, the story isn't really about artificial intelligence. It's about awakening. It's about discovering that the world that you've been accepting without question may not be the world that's actually shaping your life. Most of us don't need to escape a machine-built simulation. We need to escape the unconscious systems we've built ourselves, the routines we stopped questioning, the beliefs we've accepted without examination, the habits we've mistaken for identity, the assumptions we've inherited instead of intentionally choosing. The matrix isn't always around us. Sometimes it's within us. And awareness is what allows us to see it. Choice is what allows us to leave it. That's why the Sherman Rivers System isn't primarily about becoming more productive. It's about becoming more present. Because presence is where intention lives. When you're fully present, you notice opportunities that autopilot never sees. You recognize the moment before the reaction, the breath before the response, the question before the assumption. That's where your freedom exists. not in controlling everything that happens to you, but in deciding how you will participate in what happens next. That is one of the greatest powers we possess. Not perfection, not unlimited discipline. The ability to consciously choose our direction. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for life to change. You begin changing the way you live it, one intentional choice at a time. Ideas only become valuable when they begin changing the way you live. Otherwise, they're just interesting thoughts. That's why every lesson in the Sherman Rivers System eventually comes back to the same question. What will you do differently today? Not next month, not next year, today. Because intention is never practiced in the future. It's always practiced in the present. Think about how often your day changes direction without your permission. You're about to begin meaningful work, a notification appears, someone interrupts you, a thought reminds you of something you forgot to do. Without realizing it, 15 minutes disappear, then 30. By the end of the day, you feel busy but not fulfilled. Nothing dramatic happened. You simply surrendered dozens of small decisions without noticing them. That's how autopilot works. It doesn't steal your life in a single moment. It borrows a few seconds here, a few minutes there, until years have quietly passed. The good news is that intention works the same way. You don't reclaim your life all at once. You reclaim it one decision at a time. The next time you reach for your phone without thinking, pause. Before responding in frustration, pause. Before saying yes because it's easier than saying no, pause. Before telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow, pause. That pause is more powerful than it appears. It creates space between the person you've been and the person you're becoming. Within that space, something remarkable happens. You remember that you have a choice. And once you remember you have a choice, you're no longer completely on autopilot. You're participating again. That's today's daily focus. Don't try to redesign your entire life. That's another form of overwhelm. Instead, choose one recurring moment that usually happens without thought. Maybe it's the first 10 minutes after waking up. Maybe it's how you respond when someone criticizes you. Maybe it's what you do immediately after finishing work. Maybe it's the habit of reaching for your phone whenever silence appears. Whatever that moment exists, meet it with awareness. Take one slow breath. Then ask yourself one question. If I were choosing this on purpose, would I make the same decision? Don't judge the answer. Simply notice it. Because awareness without judgment creates clarity. Clarity creates choice. And repeated choices gradually create a different life. This isn't about becoming someone new tomorrow. It's about becoming a little more present today than you were yesterday. That's how intentional lives are built. Not through massive breakthroughs, but through ordinary moments that are finally lived consciously. Imagine looking back on your life 20 years from now. What do you think you'll remember? Probably not the hundreds of emails you answered, not the notifications you checked, not the routines you repeated without thinking. You remember the moments when you were fully present, the conversations that mattered, the decisions that changed your direction, the times you chose courage instead of comfort, the moments when you stopped reacting and started living. That's what this lesson has been about. Not productivity, not discipline, presence. Over the last 4 lessons, we've been building a foundation, one layer at a time. Awareness taught you to notice your life. Pattern recognition taught you to see what keeps repeating. Systems thinking revealed why those patterns continue. Now you've arrived at the moment where everything can begin to change. The pause. The quiet space where awareness becomes action, where habit meets intention, where yesterday loses its grip on tomorrow. Most people spend their lives believing they need a different future. Very few stop long enough to realize they first need a different relationship with the present, because the future isn't created someday. It's created one ordinary decision at a time, one conversation, one reaction, one moment of attention. Repeated often enough, those moments become character. Character becomes direction. Direction becomes destiny. This is why intentional living isn't about controlling every part of your life. It's about refusing to surrender the parts that you can influence. The next decision, the next response, the next opportunity to become fully present. And that's enough. In many ways, that's all you've ever truly had. One moment, one choice, one opportunity to participate instead of drift. Perhaps that's why the ancient philosophers placed so much emphasis on attention, because they understood something we're still learning today. A distracted life is eventually lived by accident. An intentional life is lived by design. So the next time you catch yourself moving through one day without really being there, pause, take one breath, ask one question. Am I thriving in this moment or merely passing through it? That question may only take a second to ask, but it has the power to change direction of years. Because every intentional life begins the moment you stop living on autopilot. Before moving to the next lesson, spend a few quiet moments considering these questions. Where in your life has habit become stronger than intention? What daily decision have you stopped examining simply because it's familiar? When does autopilot show up most often in your day? Don't look for dramatic answers. Look for honest ones, because honest awareness is where meaningful change begins. And let's continue the journey. You've now completed the first 4 lessons of the SRS. You've learned to become aware. You've learned to recognize patterns. You've learned to understand systems. And now you've learned to interrupt them with intentional choice. That foundation changes everything. From this point forward, the question is no longer whether you have choices. The question is whether you're directing those choices toward what matters most. Because attention is your most limited resource. Where you consistently direct it determines what grows. That is the focus of the next lesson. Until then, practice the pause. Protect it. Because it is in that brief space between stimulus and response that your future is quietly being written. And remember, don't sleepwalk through a life you have the power to consciously live.